You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we have a surprising update here as far as Donald Trump's Georgia prosecution is concerned. This is still the prosecution that's ongoing, that won't be wiped away because he's able to put an attorney general at the DOJ who will, of course, withdraw from those cases. This is a state case that is still ongoing as of right now. The appeals court in Georgia has disqualified District Attorney Fani Willis from prosecuting Donald Trump's Georgia case. So to what extent does this imperil the future of this case moving forward?
Well, it's not a good development on the accountability front, but this one is far from over, Brian. There are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, remember, there was a whole bunch of litigation before the presiding trial court judge, Scott McAfee, about whether Fani Willis should be disqualified and her whole office should be removed from prosecuting the RICO case she brought against Donald Trump and I think 17 of his co-conspirators in their efforts to try to overturn the results of the Georgia election. And Scott McAfee, after a lengthy hearing, ruled that, well, there may be an appearance of conflict or impropriety, but there's no actual conflict. Nevertheless, he said to kind of remedy the appearance problem, either Fani Willis can remove herself from the case or her first assistant, her right-hand prosecutor that she hired, Nathan Wade, can remove himself from the prosecution. Nathan Wade promptly walked away from the case. Then Donald Trump and his co-conspirators appealed Scott McAfee's ruling, and we just got a ruling from the Georgia State Appeals Court. Importantly, it was a split decision. There were 3 judges sitting on the panel that decided this issue. 2 of the judges said, we agree with Judge McAfee that this is only an appearance problem, an appearance of conflict or impropriety, no actual conflict. But we don't think Judge McAfee went far enough, so we're going to order that District Attorney Willis and her entire office should be disqualified. They can no longer handle this RICO prosecution. But here is why it's so important, Brian, to always read the dissent, because it was a 2-1 split. And here, I'm just going to read one and a half sentences that the dissenting judge said, Judge Benjamin Land. Here's what he said, quote, for at least 43 years, our appellate courts down in Georgia have held that an appearance of impropriety or conflict without actual conflict provides no basis for the reversal of the trial court's denial of the motion to disqualify. And the judge added, we, the appellate court, have no authority to reverse Judge McAfee, the trial court's ruling. None, period, he said for emphasis. So, Brian, this one is far from over because of that split and because of the really strongly worded dissent that said not only is this an erroneous decision by my 2 colleagues on this panel of the 3-judge panel, but we didn't even have the legal authority to do what those 2 judges concluded should be done. So stay tuned because there's a lot more to come on this issue.
Glenn, you said something that caught my attention, and that was this idea that that there is the possibility that it's not just Fani Willis who would be disqualified from this case if the appeals court decision holds up when it ultimately goes to the Georgia Supreme Court, but it may be her entire office. So my initial question to you was going to be, okay, even if they do decide, as misguided as we think it may be, to disqualify Fani Willis, can't her office just step in and continue doing the good work that they've already started? And presumably, anybody would be able to pick up the reins in the Fulton County DA's office left behind by Fani Willis. But if they do opt to disqualify the entire district attorney's office in Fulton County, who would then pick up the mantle of this ongoing prosecution against Trump?
Yeah, great question, and a challenging question for the prosecutors of Georgia. And here's why. So if this ruling stands from the appeals court, stands all the way up through the appellate process, because there are more steps in the appellate process to come, but if it stands, then not only will District Attorney Willis be disqualified from the case, her entire office is disqualified from the case. But down in Georgia, there is this sort of council that oversees all of the Georgia state prosecutors in all of the counties of Georgia. So what would happen is this entire prosecution would have to be transferred from the Fulton County Georgia District Attorney's office to the District Attorney's office of another county, one that was completely uninvolved with the prosecution up until now, or up until the transfer. That is a challenge. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say that then I guess the question becomes, because a lot of these different counties, obviously politics imbues a lot of what we see. As unfortunate as that is, you're going to see a district attorney in Fulton County that is more willing, I think, to stand up to a Republican president or Republican politicians than you are to see a Ruby Red County's district attorney's office is going to be willing to do so. So I guess in terms of the longevity or the viability of this ongoing prosecution, who determines which county this goes to and whether, it'll be a red or blue county?
Yeah, Brian, there is an organization called the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia that would be making that decision. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know what the politics of that organization is, but what I do know is, no good deed will go unpunished. No matter what decision they make about which county to send this prosecution to, if and only if, it's an important caveat, this ruling withstands all of the appeals that are about to come, it's going to be a challenge because people are going to accuse that organization who has that responsibility to transfer the case to another county prosecutor's office. They're going to say, you sent it to a county that's too red. You sent it to a county that's too blue. So it will be a challenge, I think, to find the right county to send it to. The other thing is, it kind of depends on who the district attorney is in that county, regardless of politics, red or blue. That person is going to have a real appetite and the resources that come with this incredible, this extraordinary prosecution. They're going to have an appetite to go hard, to go aggressive, and to make sure that when a group of people, a conspiracy, indeed a RICO conspiracy, tries to run roughshod over the expressed will of the Georgia state voters, violating all sorts of Georgia state election laws in the process, to try to throw the election to somebody who lost the election, that is a tall order. But I hope that whatever district attorney's office this lands with, if the case is transferred, is up to that challenge.
And Glenn, finally, when are we going to even find out? This is going to be challenged in the same way that it's challenged in New York. Right now, Trump's lawyers in New York are saying that the case should be thrown out because this is the president-elect, and they're trying. I don't know the justification that they're using to try and suggest that the president is above the law, and even though he was convicted on 34 felony counts, that he shouldn't be sentenced on anything, that the whole slate should be wiped clean. That's being challenged. We're waiting to find out what happens in New York. They're obviously going to try the same thing down in Georgia. So when is that issue? Whether the whole case gets wiped away magically because of Donald Trump's election to office, when is that going to be adjudicated?
Yeah, so the timing, I think, is an entirely open question, but let's talk about next steps in the appeals process. Because this was a 3-judge panel, the next thing I predict District Attorney Fani Willis's office will do is they will appeal it or ask the full appellate court bench, what we call en banc review. Every single appellate judge in Georgia, they will ask for a rehearing of this case in front of the entire appellate court bench. And I predict, because it was a 2-1 split, there may very well be enough appellate court judges in Georgia who are willing to take this up to definitively and authoritatively resolve this question that we will probably see en banc review. Then, regardless of who wins or who loses, you have to believe one side or the other. The losing party will appeal it up to the Georgia State Supreme Court, and they will probably accept it for review and want to sort of definitively lay this issue to rest. And the good news, if there is any good news, is that this really isn't the kind of case that can go up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because this is exclusively interpreting Georgia state law regarding conflicts and the remedies for conflicts or the appearance of conflicts. So there really is no U.S. constitutional basis for the Supreme Court to take it up. But here is the other thing that I think is a point of light amidst the Trump-induced darkness in which we are all living these days. Remember, there were, I think, a total of 18 co-conspirators, some of whom pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate in this massive RICO case. Donald Trump is but one of those RICO defendants who's been indicted. And so even if the case pauses against Donald Trump or gets dismissed against Donald Trump entirely, as long as the appeals court ultimately say, no, you can keep prosecuting this case even if it has to be transferred to a different county district attorney's office, the case will proceed. It will move through the system. Now, RICO cases generally are very slow-moving animals, and this one is perhaps, moving more slowly than others. But think about this, and I want everybody to hold fast to this, Brian. Let's assume that the case has to be suspended against Donald Trump while he's in office, which is a similar issue to the one that is playing out up in the New York prosecution. Fani Willis, or whatever district attorney assumes responsibility for this prosecution, can try all of the remaining co-conspirators, and then once those cases are resolved, the minute Donald Trump leaves office, there is going to be a ready-made prosecution waiting for him that has already played out in court against his co-conspirators. So the evidentiary table will be set. And if Fani Willis, or what other district attorney assumes responsibility for this case, wins convictions against Donald Trump's co-conspirators, it will also be an imminently triable case against Donald Trump when he leaves office. I know it feels like a very, long time off in the future, Brian, but, justice is not a sprint. Justice is not even a marathon. Justice is a journey, and this journey will be unfolding for years to come, but hopefully the prosecutors down in Georgia will keep their sights set on accountability for Donald Trump and all of his co-conspirators.
Well, that was well said and seems like a good spot to leave off. So, of course, we will continue to follow this as this process plays itself out. Of course, the next steps, as you mentioned, are we can expect some type of en banc review at the Georgia Appeals Court, and pretty soon thereafter, a appeal up to the Georgia Supreme Court, depending on which side decides to do it. So still more to come in Georgia. For those who are watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.